Tall Boys and Trackmasters is brought to you by Expert Exhaust. Expect more for your money. MTB Shock Dock, your choice for suspension needs. High Gear Success. From helping racers get sponsored to motorsports event operation and promotion, shift your passion into high gear.
Track 93, the place to get ready to race.
And by IADV. From routes, guided tours, and more, we'll help you get lost.
Yeah, for some reason, when I see a log, my sphincter tightens. I start to tremble. I go all sweaty.
I'm a big fan of the 1.5 pork chop cans, personally.
You gotta make sure you get your protein and carbohydrates all in one shot.
Yep.
Nice looking bike.
That thing would look good with a hot fender too.
Yes, it would. Yeah.
Got the line.
Yes, it does.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 90 of Tall Boys.
And diners and drive-ins and dual sports and dives.
Yeah, this is definitely a spoof episode of our good buddy there from Diners, Drive-Ins, Dives, Guy Fieri. You know, it was funny whenever I was putting the little snippet together there. I just basically Google search Guy Fieri motorcycle, and that was the first one that popped up. There was him in his riding outfit with his spiky hair. And
Yeah, he's a cranker for sure.
yeah, he's a hog cranker. I always laughed at meme. It was always, have you ever seen Guy Fieri, the lead singer of Smash Mouth, and what's the one guy from Insane Clown Posse? They all look exactly the same. Have you ever seen all three of them in the room together?
No, I haven't. I can't picture the guy from Insane Clown Posse because I'm employed.
You're not a juggalo? All right. Well, we're going to get right into it here tonight. First off, I do want to apologize for taking a slight hiatus there last week. For those of you who know, my one son, Sawyer, has hydrocephalus. So he has a VP shunt that drains spinal fluid off of his brain. And we were pretty concerned last Tuesday that that thing may have been malfunctioning. So we had to take him to the hospital really quickly. Thank God everything was good on that. And we're back here tonight for another episode. So, Trevor, how are you, buddy?
Can't complain. Been enjoying the weather. I tell Shiloh that, we got cheated out of a lot of good camping weather, a lot of good riding weather through spring to early summer. And now that we're in the late summer and fall, things have cleared up. We've been trying to camp all we can. I've been enjoying the new Taco Tell, as we affectionately call it, camper shell on the Tacoma. And I'm excited to be able to use that at Red River Scramble, which we'll be attending shortly. That should be a good time.
Just a couple of weeks. We'll be down there taking part in, like Trevor said, the Red River Scramble put on by Mr. Drew Faulkner and Moto Adventure. Excited about that. I'm excited to see the Taco Tell in person. So we are going to switch things up just slightly here this evening, and we are actually going to start the show off with a little industry news. And up first tonight on Industry News, we have Madman Chris Birch has launched his new off-road training series, Everything Adventure. This series covers topics such as bike setup, body positioning, sand, mud, rocks, and hill riding, along with other skills such as clutch control, wheelies, and recovery. You can catch this out on his new website, saynotoslow.com. So it's good to see Mr. Chris continuing with his extremely popular series there of training videos.
The recovery thing will be especially useful for the guys that try to ride like Chris on a big bike.
Yeah, that's going to be a very important skill with that.
He does fill a good niche. So the same way that Brett Tax leans more towards the more like mild side of ADV, it's great that Chris is leaning more towards the you almost have to be insane to attempt this on a big bike crowd.
Yeah.
Which is probably near and dear to your heart.
Oh yeah, it's definitely up my alley there. All the Chris Birch stuff I've loved for years, and having the Africa Twin and thinking that I'm a quarter of his skill level, taking it through things always brings a smile on my face. So we'll see how that works out. A little bit of sad news here this evening as well. We had a absolute motorsports icon pass away here in the last couple of weeks, and that was Mr. John Penton. And, I think this is going to be kind of a weird transition into the next industry news segment that we have here, kind of the beginning and the end. This is kind of weird timing in my opinion, but obviously one of the most influential motorcycle pioneers passed away. John Penton died at the age of 100. His son, Jack, who's always been by his side and been steeped in motorcycles as well as John has, kind of had this to say there to everybody that was fans with him. He said, John Penton arrived at the finish line this morning after a long and amazing life. He was happy that he passed peacefully after enjoying his 100th birthday with so many that loved him and appreciated his contributions to our lives. If you don't know who John Penton is, you probably shouldn't be on a motorcycle, but for those of you who may not know, John was pretty well the pioneer of getting KTM here to the United States. He was the first guy to go over there and kind of be that liaison between the factory in Austria here in the U.S. Had his own motorcycle company, Penton Motorcycles, which they have a history and pedigree of all their own. But long and happy life. I think we could all wish to be 100 years old when we go. And like I said, that kind of leads us into this last and kind of also sad news, and it regards the company that he helped bring over.
Yep.
Is this the end of Austrian KTM? Pierre Mobility Group's financial savior and entrepreneur Rajiv Bajaj was recently interviewed with CNBC, where he stated the need to move manufacturing away from Europe and to cheaper facilities abroad. Trevor, I seem to remember a few weeks back there was a particular set of boys that did an episode talking about how this financial lifesaver rescue from Bajaj was going to be the death knell of KTM. And I can't really fault them for their decisions and what they've had to do here recently to stay afloat. But when the guy that financially saved you comes out and says to a major network that we need to move the production away from Austria into cheaper outlets, that is the death knell of KTM as we know it to me.
Yeah, in my opinion, KTM ceases to exist without Austrian manufacture. The same way that they've done with the when I say internationally, I suppose I mean that bikes produced outside of Austria, the way they still hide behind the whole like Austrian engineered and manufactured thing. They lean really heavily on that image, and to an extent that justifies the price. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about KTMs. I've really enjoyed mine. I know a lot of guys have really enjoyed theirs. The whole purpose of KTM initially moving production over to India, for instance, was to reduce the cost of bikes like the Duke 390 initially. I won't say that I guarantee it, but I would be extremely surprised if an Indian manufactured EXC or XCW, whatever, any enduro model would see any price drop from being manufactured in India. I think they'll continue to be their current price, but they'll be built to a much tighter price point.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. We're already seeing some major headaches and issues with new KTMs, and specifically ones manufactured by Bajaj. Look at the new 390 Enduro and Adventure Rs. I'm seeing multiple reports of fueling issues. There's the funky kickstand switch that's built into the foot peg mount, where if you stand up on the foot pegs and you do any type of aggressive riding, the bike just wants to shut off immediately.
Yep.
I moved one around at the dealership floor at Waynesburg before I bought my 700 and just kind of felt everything, and just stuff felt cheap. You know what I mean? I mean, the bike itself is a good price and it's a good niche market for what it's designed for, but I'm afraid you're going to see all those little nuances work their way into the flagship models, like you said, the EXCs, the XCWs, the
I agree.
350 and 500 dual sports, and the 690 enduros and such. So, I mean, time will tell, but like you said, I don't see them relinquishing that price and still clinging on to that Austrian heritage, even though the thing's not made in those factories anymore.
Yeah, having ridden a 390 Adventure or for all of maybe 5 minutes, it definitely felt built to price point. I don't really like cable clutches that much,
which we'll get into later.
I mean, most of them are fine. This one felt especially it's like your leverage and engagement points were just not right.
Yeah.
I'm not paying 13 grand for a Indian built KTM EXC, and it's that simple. I'll continue to rebuild my 350 as necessary. And it also makes me a little bit worried about the future or the availability of KTM parts, like OEM parts direct from KTM. I don't necessarily want to throw in a piston into my bike that was built to the lowest price point.
Yeah, that's true. Now, I mean, we've talked about it before on the show. I mean, every major manufacturer does this these days. You know, Honda has facilities in Thailand. A lot of the Japanese bikes have that counterpart in Thailand. But it's just, I think on that front, when you have those major corporations like Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, and that Japanese branding, you know, they were never out there to be the cutting edge of absolute technology and the best of the best, and you know, bold, aggressive, in your face, just flash.
Ready to race.
Yes.
How on earth do you continue on with a tagline like ready to race?
Ready to rebuild, right?
Yeah, ready to rebuild.
Ready to restructure.
I'm sure that's what your mom would say. But I can't fault Honda for having manufacturing outside of Japan. My Kawasaki, which was nothing but reliable, was built similarly. No issues out of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, you know, I have some faith in companies that choose to move production to places like that when they're not going through the most significant restructuring in the last decade.
Right.
Normally, even normal manufacturing suffers when there's restructuring, especially after you lay off, you know, a lot of your good machinists. And quality inspectors is a huge thing. A lot of people don't really think about when they, you know, consider what goes into making a big bike, but quality inspection is a huge deal. Having folks like that laid off and then transferring your manufacturing elsewhere is not exactly a recipe for reliability or longevity.
Yeah, I think there's a huge difference too, you know, comparing them to the Japanese brands where, you know, Honda, Kawasaki, Yamaha, that sort of places, they may have one or two models that are solely made in Thailand or abroad, but their entire line is not made in those places. And let's be fair, a lot of those models that they manufacture are small, you know, very low displacement, not highly strung models. So it doesn't matter if they're a little cheaper.
Yeah, you can get away with a lot for something that's got like 9-to-1 compression.
You're right.
12-to-1, not so much. You know, the concept of engineering a KTM to a price point, in my opinion, goes against kind of the entire brand image. Like you said, you're paying for the aggressive enduro pedigree. The price point was justified by the added performance, and lack of weight was
Yeah.
a huge thing for me, better suspension, etc. So something that I wonder is if they start shifting manufacturing to India, WP suspension, are they exclusive to like KTM, Husqvarna, etc.? Do they make suspension for other bikes?
I'm sure they do, but I mean, to what I can recollect right now, no. I mean, it's pretty well either a Gas Husky or a KTM is
Also,
received.
what happened? What becomes of Gas?
I've always struggled with that. I mean, I own a Gas 700, and the reason why I do is because I got it so cheap.
Yep.
And we've talked about this before that, the Gas brand being acquired by Pure Mobility when they were supposed to be the cheap model of a KTM. It was your way to get that race heritage and pedigree, and like we said, the ready to race stuff.
Yeah.
For what was going to be significantly cheaper than what you could buy a Husky or a KTM for. Now, it wasn't going to have all of the features and all of the frills of the
you're
brands.
forgoing Brembo for Nissan, which
Right.
I've never had issues out of Nissan anything.
Little gripes and complaints, but nothing major. But the problem was the price never reflected that. It was still only $200 or $300 more expensive to buy the Husky or buy the KTM.
Yep.
So that's what everyone did. They said, I don't want to take a chance on this. A lot of people not in the know, not understanding what the bike was. And like Waynesburg Power Sports reaps the benefits of buying all these leftover gases that they can't sell because that's that same issue. So, we the consumers benefit from it. The local dealerships that buy that leftover stock benefits from it. But at the end of the day, Gas and Pure Mobility didn't benefit from any of it. So, yeah, that's my soapbox with Gas.
Well, I did try Bobby's Gas 500 and really liked it.
Yeah, like I said, it is what it is. It's just a red KTM or Gas or Husky, but you buy a leftover one, you get a heck of a deal. And I know Waynesburg sold a lot to FDSR guys here recently. So. Let's go through a couple of comments we got here tonight so far. We got Mr. Greg Blakey. He says, keep your KTMs locked up tight. Will do, Mr. Greg, will do.
Yeah, and we might see an increase in value on used KTMs provided this shift to Indian manufacturing goes through.
I've got my 500 over here for sale, and I might hold on to it just for nostalgia and history's sake. Might be worth some money. Jim Montaigne says, what's up, fellas? Jim, how are you doing, buddy? And how's that new Ibex 450 treating you? He's going to be joining the fold with us here again.
Nice.
The new 450 MT. All right, well, we appreciate everybody sticking around here for the industry news segment. We wanted to do this first off. So, Trevor, let's get into the meat and potatoes here. No pun intended for Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, but of tonight's episode, and that is clutches, calipers, and chains. We are going to go through all three of these categories and just try to give you guys an overall generalization of what to look for, what's worked for us in the past, and just some basic maintenance tips that you can hopefully take with you tonight. And first up, chain meet sprocket, sprocket meet chain. Obviously, a chain and sprocket combination is what drives the motorcycle forward, and it is a very often overlooked aspect of dual sport and adventure motorcycles. There are so many different combinations of alloys, of chain types, and we'll just give you kind of a broad generalization, like I said, of every one of these categories. But, just kind of a basic rundown. You want to keep your chain maintained. You want to lube it. Nobody likes a dry chain. I think that's something that you see a lot in riding groups whenever you go out is guys that just refuse to do any type of chain maintenance or
You'll see guys with bound links. It'll be a pretty straight line of links. You'll have a little mountain peak in there. We'll just go in and start on chains. So there's unsealed chains, O-ring chains, X-ring chains, Z-ring chains, and W ring chains. So where you see unsealed chains the most currently would probably be like motocross. Reason being is those O-rings, those seals it takes a little bit of force to get them to bend around the front sprocket and then to unbend and then to bend again, back sprocket and unbend again. So you multiply that out over your number of links. Or it is an addition of drag to your motor. And if you are looking for absolute peak horsepower to the ground, then an unsealed chain is probably the move. But they are extremely maintenance intensive. They're probably the single worst chain for dual sport use.
Yeah.
Because what do you do when you go dual sport riding?
Everything.
Exposing it to dirt, mud, and water.
Yeah.
That is probably the worst thing that you could expose a mechanical joint to. So they wear out quick. The lubricant does not stay between the links, which is where it actually matters. I see this on the forums all the time. Guys debate about sealed versus unsealed chains. I would argue that even the worst sealed chain out there in terms of added drag or friction to your system is better than whatever rusted mess that you end up with after 5 rides of dual sport riding with an unsealed chain. So both my Trail 90s have unsealed chains because I'm definitely not going to try to source an O-ring chain for a motor that makes like 6 horsepower. But in exchange, they're a lot more maintenance heavy.
Yeah, they are. I'm definitely going to be running at least an O-ring chain on anything that I have. For years and years and years, I've had such great luck with just the Bargain Basement Parts Unlimited O-ring chains. Those seem to me to be the best for what I do, the abuse that I put my bikes through. You can get them for under $100, usually around $100. And I mean, I'm sure that they're a lot like any other product in our realm and our sport. There's probably only 2 or 3 factories that actually make these chains, and you're just paying for the name at that point.
So I've had good luck out of Primary Drive.
Primary Drive stuff's good. RK, DID, lots of good companies out there.
DID is probably the pinnacle.
Yeah, I've ran an X-ring chain on one of my old YZ race bikes, and I do remember getting a little bit more usage out of it than I would just a regular O-ring chain.
But then it comes down to like everything else in this hobby is, self-funded guys that don't have a, massive bank account to back the hobby. It's twice the price, but you're getting twice the life out of it.
Exactly right.
If it's twice the price, you're getting 20% more life. It probably doesn't add up. One thing about like off-brand chains, so like Parts Unlimited sources from manufacturer X, Primary Drive sources from manufacturer X. They're at the liberty to change manufacturers whenever they want without having to notify the consumer.
Right.
So you might have a run of Primary Drive chains, for instance, that you get great service out of, and then you get your next one and it's half the lifespan because they've changed manufacturers, whereas companies like RK, DID produce in-house.
Right. I would say, just from like you kind of mentioned a couple of things, but just from a maintenance standpoint, you want to check the chain tension, which is typically 2 to 3 fingers.
Yep.
Roughly at the very end of the top rub plate. You want to try to see what you got right there. And that is with you on the bike with all your gear and the suspension loaded. Because if you try to check that unloaded, by the time you get that on there, maybe it might be a little bit too tight. I see that problem a lot.
Many tight chains, especially when we do the 3 or 4 detour. I see chains that look tight with no weight on the bike.
Yeah.
Something else I see too, we talked about people neglecting to lubricate their chains, is people neglecting to adjust them. It's a wear item. As it wears, each joint in that chain gets a little bit more slop in it.
Yeah.
So it effectively stretches, from measurement between X, so many links to so many links.
Right.
A tight chain is way worse than a loose chain, though.
Absolutely. Chris, our buddy Chris Halls has referred to
your wheel bearings and your countershaft bearings because it's introducing additional loading onto them.
Yeah,
And most people
24
don't
hour.
realize like how much difference in chain tension there is between like your free suspension height, your loaded suspension height, and then if you're one of the guys that get a little rowdy, slamming that thing down off a water brake and fully compressing your rear suspension, there is a huge range of tension.
There really is. I've seen it firsthand where guys are out riding with me, and this has happened a few years ago, and they're like, dude, my rear suspension just is bound up. It's not working at all. And you get to the bike, and it's because the chain's way too tight.
Yep.
The thing cannot compress and go through the full range of motion of the rear suspension just because the chain is the limiting factor.
So back on the topic of like O-ring chains, that's all I've ever ran. Your X rings, Z rings, and W rings are more expensive, largely due to the O rings being more expensive to manufacture. And guys debate to no end on the forums about the added horsepower to the rear wheel by going from O ring to X ring, and I'm sure it's not zero, but the price difference for me has always been a little bit of a gatekeeper, I guess, in getting into that realm. Now, for motocross stuff like that, racing, it makes sense, but
yeah. Well, if you're not buying a new one every single round because you don't have to, you know what I mean? That's poor people like us. We got to run the.
Unfortunately, my sponsors don't let me have X ring, Z ring, or
every other ride, right?
Yeah, anything else every other ride. On the topic of chain maintenance too, you talked about lubrication. So I get pretty good life out of O-ring chains. How many miles are you seeing out? Well, we have different riding styles, but how many miles are you seeing out of an O-ring chain typically?
So if I'm doing my typical year, which is, let's say, 3 to 4 big dual sport events, us just riding around our local stuff, I'm going to say 2 to 3 times a month. And then even throwing the 24-hour rally events I've been doing as well. I mean, with a parts unlimited O-ring chain, I'm getting about a year out of that chain.
Yeah. So
that's a lot of miles. So
yeah, any idea? Is that like, 3,000 miles?
Probably a little more than that. I'd say closer to 4,000 miles.
So I'm getting like between 4 and 5.
Right.
Between my Kawasaki and my KTM on an O-ring chain. And the only thing I do for maintenance is clean the dirt off of it, clean the mud off of it, but don't pressure wash the mud off of it because you will push all that grit past the O-rings and it will wear out quicker.
Yeah, pressure washer is the worst thing for a O-ring chain.
So typically, honestly, what I do is when I'm cleaning my bike off, I avoid my chain. Like when I'm washing my bike, I avoid my chain, let the dirt and stuff dry on there. And then I just dry brush all of it off that I can, and then wet a rag down with WD-40 and completely coat my chain.
Yep. And
that's all I've done. Some guys do, there's like DuPont Chain Saver. There's, Maxima, like every company in the game makes some form of product. Some guys use like bar and chain oil, gear oil. With a sealed chain, the actual lubricant between the links is, contained by the O-rings. Really, the only thing you're looking to do with any form of lubricant is just lubricate the O-rings against the chain links.
Right.
I know WD-40 is not a lubricant, but it is a water displacer.
That's right.
So that helps too. But one big thing is to not clean an O-ring, X-ring, any chain with seals in it with gasoline, brake cleaner, or any other harsh solvents. They will swell the O-rings and it will shorten the life of your chain.
100%.
Kerosene is okay.
Yeah. You can also, if you're using one of those other products to lube the chain, you can put too much on it, which is going to make all the dirt and the grit stick to the chain immediately and wear the O-rings and stuff out a little bit faster.
That's a big gripe I have against some of these products out there. And I think I've got a can I used one time, and it was like putting tacky air filter oil on the chain. I went for one ride out to Valley Falls and back, and that thing had like stalactites on it from collecting dust.
Yep.
So
one last thing, as far as like chain adjustment and stuff, I'd like to say too, is a lot of times if you buy one of these chains, it's going to come with a set number of links, and it's not going to be exactly what's specific to your bike. So make sure that whenever you cut it to length, you put your adjusters about halfway in and cut to length. You don't want to have to run the adjusters all the way out to accommodate whatever the length of that chain is out of the box, because it's going to stretch regardless. You're going to have to do a little bit of adjustment. Well, then you're out of adjustment. You have to cut it anyway. And along those lines, if you do have a motorcycle, I suggest once a year taking the chain adjuster bolts all the way out, putting some anti-seize on them and running them back in.
So
take it from a
that
guy
little
who had
gas
one
station,
snap off. It's
that little
not fun
gas
to get out.
station at Cool Springs, I had our buddy AJ's CRF 250L up on a milk crate with the back wheel off of it, with the chain, trying to back the chain adjusters out with my little quarter drive ratchet, because those things were completely seized and his chain was loose as can be. That is one of the first things I do when I get a hold of a bike, is run the chain adjusters out, make sure the threads are clean, not galled, anti-seize it, and run them back in.
Yep.
And,
That's a huge overlooked item on a motorcycle.
Yep, for sure.
Yep.
So talked about chains. Let's talk about sprockets. I don't even know if any companies make aluminum front sprockets. I've only ever ran steel front sprockets.
Yeah, now that you say that, I think there's a couple Renthals I've seen or ran on bikes once in a while that were aluminum fronts, but yeah.
So I typically, I don't know, everybody plays with their gear ratios, or a lot of people do, I guess, at least. I've had good service. I like Sunstar, JT,
Primary
OEM
drive.
sprockets. Yeah, primary drive. OEM sprockets on KTMs are actually pretty good. I'm trying to think other companies. That's pretty much just what I stick to.
Yeah.
I know that Dirt Tricks is a big name, especially among the KTM guys now, but I can't justify the dang money.
No. And I'm sure we'll get into this here just shortly, but I know a lot of people are on the fence of, if you want the most durability, you run steel front and rear. I'm kind of in that camp as well. I like a steel front and rear sprocket, but I 1000% will stay away from the dual alloy rear sprockets where you have, the steel and the aluminum that are pressed together. I've had one of those come apart on a race bike, and it was
so like super sprocks. That was their big claim to fame, is somebody that stayed awake through engineering class. You still have the rotating mass at the outer edges of that sprocket, which is where it has the most effect on like drivetrain drag. You're introducing a lot of additional failure points. That's same reason that I've never ran like floated rotors on a dual sport. Is what's the enemy of metal sliding on metal? Is grit, water. Every time you go ride and get in water, you're creating a valve lapping compound. And I've never been crazy about the idea of super sprox. I run steel fronts, aluminum rears, and on my KTM at least, I have good service out of them. The front wears out about the same time that the rear does, which works fine. On my KTM, I've only ever ran steel on steel. Everybody's got their opinion. One thing I do like is a chain that has the like little relief grooves, like a self-cleaning chain for mud, because I end up in mud a lot. And if you have mud pack into a sprocket and affect your chain tension, it makes things kind of goofy.
Yeah, there's a lot of different little pieces too to make sure you pay attention to. Like, I know certain models like a XR650L could be bad about wearing the countershaft sprocket splines out. I know a lot of guys put 650R front sprockets because it's a little bit thicker, heavier duty there. It can also be bike specific for wear too. Like my 650R, for example, would absolutely destroy an aluminum rear sprocket no matter how you adjusted the chain. And once I put a steel on the back, it was good to go. So those higher torque thumpers typically require something a little bit more substantial back there. And I would honestly be, you'd be crazy not to at least in your kit on the dual sport adventure bike that you have, whatever size chain you have, make sure you look that up. Get a master link for it to carry with you and a little short couple links of chain just in case.
Yep. And for guys that run O-ring chains, which hopefully everybody runs the sealed chain, is make sure your master link has some O-rings in with it.
Yeah.
Because that actually spaces that master link laterally. And if you don't have those in there, it can end up like too close to the engine and essentially machine away some aluminum from your countershaft area, which is not good. But I've always carried a spare master link and a little pill bottle in my backpack, and everybody should do the same. Something else I also carry is a little thing of like you can buy at Advanced Auto Parts, the silicone high temp brake parts lubricant, and like the little packet. So when you throw all that stuff back together, you can at least put a little bit of lube on it and feel better as you're limping your bike back to wherever.
Yep. I'd say one of the last components of that entire setup that a lot of people might overlook and you don't really think about is your chain rollers, the chain guide, the rub plate around the swing arm. Check all that stuff too, because those are obviously wear items. Funny story, was out riding around on my mom's DR350 there a couple months back, and this thing was making a hellacious noise. It sounded like one of the transmission bearings was coming out of it. And you know what it was? It was the upper chain roller. The bearings in it had come out, and every time the chain would grab it, it would just make this horrendous grinding noise in third gear only, which kind of made you think that it was something in the transmission, but it was just the upper roller bearings. So
stuff like that is how you get a hold of a really good used bike for next to nothing, because the seller is convinced that it's blown up.
Yeah.
But
so yeah, kind of in conclusion of that, I think, obviously you want to make sure you have the correct tension.
Yep.
You don't want to be mixing and matching, a bucktooth rear sprocket with a brand new front and a half-worn chain.
Okay, rich guy.
Typically replace everything together if you can. Now, I've been there myself where it's been, I need to ride this weekend. This front sprocket looks like it's worse than the line at the Mannington Fair as far as teeth are concerned, but I'm going to run it this weekend. Yeah, once or twice is fine, but
I got one thing. I got something to add for KTM Gas and Husqvarna guys. The bolt that holds your front sprocket on is one-time use.
Yeah, it
comes from the factory. Well, this applies to a specific range I can't recall off the top of my head, but it's most modern bikes from those manufacturers. The countershaft bolt is one-time use. Comes factory with the appropriate thread locker on it, so you don't need to add thread locker. The Belleville, the spring washer, is also one-time use. And what a lot of guys don't know is the compression that washer provides onto the countershaft assembly is what actually seals the inside engine oil, pressurized engine oil from the outside. So I want to change my front sprocket, and caught it in time. My countershaft seal had dried out to the point that it was hard as a rock from sustained heat and all that. But if you try to reuse that washer, it can cause premature failure on your countershaft seal. Something else too with like a torque-tealed single-use bolt is you might be able to get away with using it or tightening it down another time, and then you try to remove it, it just breaks off in your countershaft, and what was going to be a 20-minute chain and sprocket change is now fishing expedition to get that thing back out of there.
I think most rear sprocket bolts are the same way too. They're just a couple time use. You should replace those as well. They're not that expensive to replace them. All right. Oh, that's a lot of information. Hopefully it helps everybody out there tonight with some chain and sprocket stuff. And that's going to move on to the next component, some clutch clues, Trevor. Lots of clutch differentiators out there. You have, your standard cable clutch with your old school basket setups. You have auto clutches. You have recluse clutch. You have hydraulically operated clutches with a master and slave cylinder.
You
Lots
have
of different
clutches
things
that
there.
rely on coil springs, which
Yep.
is pretty much every Japanese bike. A lot of Euro bikes have gone to a Belleville spring. Like most KTMs don't use the coil spring setup, like the 6 radially spaced coil springs. It uses one single big dish-shaped washer to actually provide the lockup compression for your clutch.
To kind of running down the list here, obviously you want to make sure that if you have a cable clutch, your cable is adjusted correctly where you're not, smoking the thing out as soon as you try to use it.
That was an issue that a gentleman had on the Detour. Was his clutch was adjusted too tight, so that thing was never actually fully engaging the friction discs to the plates, and he's lucky he didn't completely smoke his clutch to the extent that he couldn't ride. I got that thing adjusted and sent him on his way, and he made it back to camp, so that was cool. But something else too with cable clutches, a lot of guys don't think about is when you turn your handlebars, the just free state tension on that cable changes. So turning right on like my Kawasaki, for instance, it's plenty loose. You think, man, this thing's actually too loose. There's too much play in it. You need to turn it to the left, and it binds around the headstock a little bit.
Yep.
And it's too tight.
Yep.
So that's something that's really important is figure out like which side of your handlebars or whatever turning to makes it the tightest, and make sure that it is fully engaged at that point. Or be a nerd and read your owner's manual and set it like that.
We don't know how to read. We ride motorcycles for a living. Definitely want to make sure if you have a cable clutch that it is lubricated. The cable lubers are super inexpensive and cheap. That you should always have one in your toolbox.
Even the one from Motion Pro is only like $15, and I've got a lot of use out of mine.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like it.
Yep. You want to check your clutch arm if you do have the cable clutch.
Yep.
The O-ring that goes down inside the case. Make sure you don't have anything leaking there. And the clutch itself, some of the symptoms you might see of a clutch going bad is, obviously a lack of movement. You start noticing that it seems like it might be down on power a little bit. Yeah. It's pretty easy to tell.
Like 6th gear on hard top and go to accelerate.
Not going anywhere.
Revs go up and your speed doesn't increase.
Yeah. Pretty obvious there's a problem there.
Yep. So luckily we live in an age now where a set of good enough digital calipers from Harbor Freight's like $20 that you can inspect your clutch plates, your friction discs. And if you want to get down into it, if you think your clutch plates themselves are warped, the actual steels, just get like a 1/4-inch thick pane of glass and some feeler gauges. When I rebuilt the auto clutch for that I think 1970 model Trail 90, that's what I did, because I can't afford to stare at granite surface plate. So it worked well enough. But that's something that a lot of guys talk about, engine rebuilds and this, that, and the other, and then overlook your clutch.
Yeah. You want to make sure you inspect the steels and the fibers. Obviously, the fibers are going to be easier to tell what's messed up on them with a lack of material there.
Or glazing.
Glazing.
You can have clutch plates. You can have friction discs that mic out ideal, perfectly inspect, and they're glazed to the point that they can't actually, adequately engage with the steel plates.
Yeah. If you notice a lot of shuddering whenever you're engaging and disengaging clutch, there's a good chance that your basket has a lot of grooves in it. So that's something to look at.
Another thing too is for, I guess, both hydraulic and cable clutches, if your clutch pull feels notchy, take your clutch cover off and inspect your clutch basket for grooves.
Yep.
And back in the day, I know guys would file out the grooves or whatever, but it's simply a matter of time before that happens again. Yeah. So those grooves happen due to play between the trying to think here. I guess the play between the fingers on the outer plates and your clutch basket slamming forward when you get on the throttle or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you go file off a couple millimeters to get rid of all your grooves. Now you've like tripled the distance that those fingers can pick up momentum before they slam forward.
Yeah, it'll get you by
if you just need to race.
Yeah, I would say it'll get you by for one more ride or one more race.
File them out. But if you do it and think that it's going to be a 5,000-mile solution for dual sporting, it's probably not.
I've spent many nights in a garage with Mr. William Wright filing a clutch basket and adding a couple extra steel plates in there to take up some of that slack and make it for one more round before we had to buy a new clutch.
Yeah, racing's a different thing, especially when you're doing it, the blue collar self-funded path privateer.
Yeah.
But
I remember years ago, we always used to run the Barnett Dirt Digger like clutch baskets, and they actually had steel replaceable inserts on the grooves for the clutch basket.
Yeah.
So those little inserts would get the wear instead of the basket itself, and I think it was a couple Allen bolts you could take out and replace those little inserts. So right. I mean, essentially, you had a lifetime clutch basket at that point.
So I saw something similar to that as a product for KTMs. It was an aftermarket clutch basket, but the steel inserts were actually cast into the aluminum clutch basket. Mm-hmm. It comes down to riding style too.
It does. It does. If you're dumping the clutch constantly and you abuse it, it's gonna be a higher wear item for somebody that just barely gets on the throttle and putts around most of the time.
Or if you're Tyler Vincent and just break it. Like trying to do your old pump gears.
I've broken several of my day as well. That SSR 450, I remember trying to put it back together and had my little, 1/4-inch drive, impact driver, electric driver, and I was running the bolts in for the clutch springs, and I thought I had it turned down pretty low, and apparently I didn't, and it went in and it immediately snapped the boss off of the inner clutch basket on the spring.
That's really common. Every forum post for KTMs that talks about doing the oil pump gears, since you have to remove your clutch basket, somebody breaks the boss off because they try to wedge a screwdriver up into it, and a lot of people don't understand that a cast clutch basket is actually a pretty fragile item. It's honestly a wonder they hold together under torque.
That's true.
As well as they do. But, there's a lot of aftermarket options out there for just standard style clutches. Henson's
kind of the top of the line for standard clutches. Yeah, I had a bike that had the clutch basket, the inner basket, the pressure hub, the full Henson experience, and it was the smooth,
the unknown Henson experience.
The unknown Henson experience. Absolutely, to this day, for a cable clutch, was the best cable clutch I've ever had on a motorcycle. Henson. EBC's good stuff. DP's usually pretty good.
Yep, I like
Barnett's kind of on the cheaper end, but I've had good success with Barnett stuff. There's a lot of different options out there.
Sometimes OEM is surprisingly affordable.
Yeah, it is, especially for that kind of thing. You wouldn't think so, but clutches. I've had really good luck with stock Yamaha clutches in YZ250s. So that's a route you can go.
Then we get into like Recluses.
Yeah, Recluses and the KTM and Euro hydraulic clutches, I would say.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like the clutch on my KTM. I like the hydraulic clutch on my KTM. Haven't had any issues out of it. Bleeding, it's not fun.
No, it sucks.
The easiest thing to do if you're going to bleed a cable or a hydraulic clutch on a KTM is just take your clutch master cylinder off the handlebars and suspend it from up above the bike so the air bubbles can't actually go up. It's worked fine for me. I know a lot of guys don't care for them.
Having had my 500 for as long as I have now, I don't think I could go back to a normal cable clutch. I do like the hydraulic clutch.
Well, James, you deserve the finer things in life.
I do. I'm 35 years old and I have a mortgage. I think I deserve to have a nice clutch, right?
I agree.
But I have the Recluse clutch in my KTM 500. I've said this on the show before. It was on the bike when I purchased it. I would never buy one to put in.
They're weird.
They're very weird. There's too many nuances and things that you don't think would be a pain in the ass, but they are.
Yep.
So I kind of steer away from them. There's just so much finicky adjustments that you have to do. I would kind of stay away from the Recluse clutches. I mean, I will say this about the Recluse clutch. I had a failure in my slave cylinder on the KTM 500 last fall when we went down and did some Hatfield McCoy riding. I was glad that I had the Recluse clutch then because I was still able to ride the rest of the weekend with a blown slave cylinder. I still had the ability to move around. So that was good. But, typically I'm not a fan. But, the hydraulic clutch is nice, but there's a lot more failure points on a hydraulic clutch compared to a cable clutch. The clutch itself, all of this maintenance stuff that we've talked about with the cable clutch still applies. You still have fibers, steels, a basket that can wear. I know the KTMs are really bad about the rubber isolators in the clutch basket itself.
So that's something that, as far as KTM's go, I'm pretty mild rider. And I think when I did my oil pump gears at like 70 hours, which you really should do them sooner if you have the plastic gears, my dampers were already starting to degrade to the point that like they're supposed to be two halves bound by these little fingers or whatever. I want to pull those things out and they were all separated, and some of them had actually started to develop like stress cracks into the rubber, because if you think about it, this stuff's bathed in whatever temp your engine oil is its whole life. So that's something I need to check before rotary scramble. Unfortunately, I painted myself into a corner. I got my countershaft and countershaft seal, all that jazz off the left side. So I can't lean my bike over to take my clutch cover off to inspect my clutch dampers. A lot of guys speak really highly of the Recluse aftermarket clutch dampers for the standard KTM clutch.
I'll say too, their slave cylinder that they sell, which can be used on a standard KTM clutch or Sherco, what have you, definitely a worthwhile investment there. It's a little bit bigger piston, a little bit better quality item than what the factory stuff has on it. And it's simple as, changing your fluid too once a year at least. I've had that happen a lot.
You're supposed to do that?
Yeah, you're supposed to do that.
Once a year?
Once a year at least, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because if it starts smelling like cat pee, it's not working like it should anymore.
I don't know that I've ever smelled my clutch fluid.
It's probably pretty gross, buddy. You might want to check that.
It's probably fine. If I'm not aware of the issue, it can't exist.
That's right.
So I'm gonna grab another beer and then I'll bring up another point about clutches and
Go ahead, my friend. I'm on number 2 myself here. Appreciate everybody tuning in this evening. Again, your support goes a long way. So why don't you guys give us a like and subscribe and continue to make our podcast what it needs to be and what we like it to be in the future. What's your next point, my friend?
I bet you didn't think we were going to talk about engine oil when we were talking about clutches, but it's a big deal.
It is.
So a tale as old as time is somebody will bring home their nice new $12,000 to $14,000 European bike, and the first thing they do is hop on a forum and ask, what is the cheapest absolute, bargain barrel, whatever oil I can run in this thing. I never understood that. I sat down and did the math once. Even if you're going to run a bike for 15,000 miles, you're not going to save any appreciable amount of money by doing an inferior, cheaper oil versus a better oil compared to the cost of an engine rebuild.
That's exactly right.
It's that easy. And there's the JASO standard, which is like an independent Japanese entity that develops ratings for different types of lubricants. So like JASO MA and JASO MA2, I think, is for wet clutch stuff. Some oils aren't rated for it. I know Rotella, like Shell Rotella, is a hotly debated lubricant. A lot of guys have good luck out of it, so there's got to be something to it. I've never tried it, so I really can't weigh in on it. But in my KTM, for instance, I always just put Motor X. And
that's people will have their own opinions about that, but like you said, putting the wrong oil in a motorcycle is disastrous, not just for the clutch, but for everything else as well.
Yeah.
I'm in the camp of I'm if it's a KTM or something high strung, I'm going to use what the manufacturer recommends. I don't mind paying the Motor X price for stuff. Matter of fact, I was kind of surprised. I went up to Morgantown Honda and they had a Motor X oil change kit that had both filters, the 2 quarts of oil and everything for the gas, and it was like $50. So that's peace of mind for me, and it's something I'm going to run.
So
now, I will say
4 liters of Motor X 10W50 synthetic from Rocky Mountain ATVMC for like $60.
Yeah. I will say now, like
a liter for oil on a bike seems pretty reasonable to me.
Yeah. Now the GPX 450, there really wasn't a whole lot of stuff out there about what oil I should run. It got Rotella T4 and it was completely fine.
I get that.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the older, the Japanese 650s and that sort of thing, if you got an old thumper, it's just going to, whatever oil, it's going to be happy to have oil in it. I think you're going to be okay with that. But, the more high strung stuff, you probably want to stick with whatever the manufacturer recommends.
You can get away with a lot more, like with your oil selection on a car, for instance, but on a bike, a lot of 4-strokes share the oil between the transmission, the clutch, and the motor.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's in your best interest to spec an oil that has the best ability to withstand heat, sustained heat cycles, to resist breakdown and wear.
Yep.
The needs for a motorcycle engine that have a shared lubrication system versus the needs for a car or a diesel engine, like gasoline car, diesel engine, et cetera. They're all different. Now, my Beta 500, for instance, had separate transmission / clutch and engine oil.
Yep. Yeah, some bikes are like that.
I really didn't have any strong feelings one way or the other. But with a setup like that in the Beta, I would have ran something like Shell Rotella or whatever.
Yeah.
But you start adding in a wet clutch and, all your gears in your transmission, the mesh between all your gears, the dogs for your shift mechanism, your bearings, all that stuff. It's, in my opinion, running a good oil in your bike extends the life, not only your engine, but also of your clutch and other things.
Any of my other 4-strokes that I've had in my life, other than the KTM stuff, I've always ran Castrol Activo. I've had really, really good luck out of Castrol Activo.
I put that in both of the Trail 90s because there's a couple guys in the know, older guys that are fanatics about those things that say that is the absolute best oil that you can run, especially in 4-stroke air-cooled motors, because of its ability to withstand high temperatures and resist degradation under repeated heat cycles.
Yeah, all of my 450 race bikes I've ever had, I ran Castrol Activo, and the 650R had it in as well. No issues, no complaints. Everything was great with that. So, all right, and that's going to lead us into the last little segment of tonight, and that is, give me a break, Trevor. We've been talking about a lot of stuff tonight, but obviously,
we're nerding out.
Just nerding out. Yeah, you're right. Brakes are a very critical item. If you
let me stop you right there. Unless you bought Chinese brake pads, you're just going to keep going.
I have a short story about Chinese brake pads. Ready?
Yes.
The
Probably shorter than the stopping distance.
It was very shorter than the stopping distance. Before the 24 hours of Appalachia Buckeye Blitz, which is the Ohio rally, I was getting the Africa Twin ready to go. And I noticed, I think it was like Wednesday night, just doing my final prep before I got the thing completely set up, ready to go. One of my front brake pads was pretty low. And if you've ridden one of those Africa Twins off road, you know that you need front brakes. You need to stop that thing in a hurry. So I was like, I need pads. No one around here had any available in the time frame that I needed. But Amazon had some Chinese no-name brake pads that I could put on that thing and have brakes before the rally that weekend. Ordered them on Amazon. They came Friday morning, and I got a whole kit. It was the rear pads and both sets of front pads because that bike has 2 front brakes on it. And I was like, you know what? Since I've got all the new pads, I'm going to put them on front and rear.
Yeah.
And about, I don't know, maybe 110 miles into the rally, was coming into this turn off road, and I got on the front brakes pretty hard, and the pedal or the lever went clear to the bar, and it did not slow me down whatsoever. So the next gas stop that I got to, I pulled over and looked, and the material was completely gone off of the brake pad. It was just metal on metal, and it was that way the rest of the evening. So you know what happened? Instead of just ruining a set of brake pads, I ruined both front rotors on my Africa Twin and had to replace both of them. So that pays to tell you that buy once, cry once on a lot of motorcycle parts.
So I take some liberties here and there in terms of price and other considerations with some of the stuff on some of my bikes, which anybody, again, that's self-funded is going to end up doing. But one thing I don't cheap out on is brakes and wheel bearings.
Yeah.
Are huge. But I run OEMs for the most part. If I can't get OEMs, I run EBCs.
Mm-hmm. I've had great luck with EBC stuff.
I have too. And it's just hearing you say that's just terrifying. The idea of needing to stop, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
same thing we talked about with the hydraulic clutches too. Brake fluid, changing your brake fluid is a huge deal.
And properly bleeding your brakes.
Yes, properly bleeding the brakes. If you have an older machine, I don't think a lot of people realize this, but brake hoses themselves, the rubber brake hoses, have a shelf life.
Yep.
And there's a lot of times where you hit your brakes and they just don't seem like they work as good. And you can watch the hose itself swell a whole lot before it actually ever stops and gets to the caliper.
Let me tell you something. It wasn't on a bike specifically, but it was on a Honda. So I got a Honda quad, just a utility quad. It made like 2001 or 1998, somewhere in there. Got it from my dad's, got it up here, and had brake issues. Mm-hmm. Swapped out the hoses because they're ancient for what their service life is, and go out, go ride, and it'd be fine until the brakes started to get a little warm, and then they'd lock up, and then I'd have to get down there, crack one of the banjo bolts off, relieve the pressure, and come back home on back brakes.
Yep.
I did that twice. The master cylinder had a tiny little return passage, and it was so small that I had to hunt around for like a piece of speaker wire that I could take a single strand and poke through that thing. So if you have a bike that sat for a significant amount of time with a hydraulic brake, you need to pull off that little rubber, I don't even know what you'd call it. It's like the little rubber circle with a split in it, like a cross slit.
Yeah.
Pop that out of there and make sure your pressure return line's actually clean. So that thing gave me fits, and I was blaming everything except, what was actually causing it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, letting brake fluid sit and stuff, dude, it gets so nasty.
Very, very
It's
nasty.
corrosive. It destroys rubber.
Make sure you're not mixing brake fluid too. Whatever your bike has, a lot of people, this calls for .5.1. I've got some .4 here. It'll be all right. No, it won't. They don't mix very well.
There are a couple dot ratings of brake fluid that are compatible, and there's some that absolutely aren't. That essentially makes gel in your brake system.
Obviously, you want to check your pad wear.
Yeah, check your pad wear, check your rotors.
Check your rotor wear. That is a huge thing. I don't know how many times I've seen people where you can look at the front wheel of the bike and you see how concave the front rotor is. You're losing a lot of surface area and stopping power right there.
No need to put me on the blast in public.
I'm not doing that
now.
Hey, you want
I have seen rotors worn so thin that then when they heat up and then when the metal expands, you actually get it looks like a snake going around the rotor. It warps itself and it's crazy.
Just like a set of clutch fibers, they'll glaze over too, the rotors and the pads to the point where they won't work very well.
Now you can save a rotor and a set of pads with a little bit of sandpaper if they glazed over.
You can.
And I had to do that earlier this year because I had I've been riding a lot of really just gritty mud and water and stuff like that, and got my brakes glazed up. But checking for warping your rotor, you can do with everything still on the bike.
Yeah.
If you can
spin it.
First of all, I just get in line with the rotor. Well, the same way I check for true in my wheels, which is not the right way to do it, but it's the way that it happens, is just get in line with it and spin it and watch, if it kicks out at a certain point or whatever. Another thing I've done in the past is just take a zip tie, put it on the fork leg, and cut the end of it to where it is just touching part of the rotor and spin it around. And if the rotor gets really close and push your zip tie over, it gets really far away from it, it's where you have a warp.
Yep.
It's best to replace it at that point. I have pulled warps out of rotors with a crescent wrench and a small rubber mallet before.
It's doable, especially if you're the night before a ride. You can make that happen, no problem.
Yep, you can. And your rear rotor too, I guess it kind of goes into it. It's a protection item, but like a rotor guard, I think is a really good idea on a dual sport.
100% agree with that.
It's pretty easy to get in rocks and stuff like that and bend your rear brake rotor.
Yep.
And if you're in BFE, middle of nowhere, you bend your rear brake rotor, it's going to be not going to be a good day.
Yep. A couple more things that I would add just to kind of wrap this up a little bit is if you are messing with the brake hoses themselves and the banjo bolts, replace the copper crush washers. Those are supposed to be a one-time use. They're super cheap. Just put new ones on. Change your fluid. Make sure your hardware is good. Like I know my KTM 500 has like the little retention spring that goes up inside the caliper itself. It was broke, and
make sure that when you install a new one, it's actually installed correctly.
Yeah. Check your brake pins.
Too is caliper slide pins.
Caliper slide pins. Guess what stopped me from finishing the 24-hour rally? Caliper slide pins. The factory didn't put any grease on them, and the caliper was getting stuck.
Yeah,
I don't put grease on them either.
Grease your slide pins, people.
That's a big thing. And use a silicone-based grease. Do not mix petroleum or lithium-based grease with the OEM silicone-based grease in your slide pins because it gets weird in there.
Yep.
But that's something that's pretty overlooked, especially since most bikes have single-sided piston calipers. It relies on that caliper's ability to float side to side on those guide pins. And if it can't do that, it's going to cause some really weird braking characteristics.
Yeah, like it did on me at the last 24-hour rally where you had no brakes or they were locked up and they felt like they were dragging really bad and wouldn't let go.
Yeah, James, you'd have finished with a lot shorter time if you just didn't use your brakes.
I would have finished, period. I did. It's my first DNF, man. It was all right. I already qualified for Kentucky, and we got that coming up here next week, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it's all these when you've only got two wheels in contact with the ground, all these systems are incredibly important. You know, if you have a catastrophic chain failure, for instance, that God forbid binds your back wheel, you're in for it. You're going to end up like me and get some titanium in you. And yeah, if your brakes fail or what have you, that's going to be horrible too.
Yep. Clutch fails, you're stranded.
Yep. I'd pick a clutch failure over probably any other.
I'd probably agree with you on that as well.
Yeah.
You know, the main thing I think is too, all of these little things that we're talking about, you spend one good evening in your garage, your workshop, or wherever you're at, you can look at all these items.
And it's easy.
Pretty quickly to do. Yeah, it's not hard maintenance.
Easy work, especially if you have a service manual or a YouTube video to go off of.
Yeah, that's a big thing these days.
Yeah.
So, you know, 3 little segments of the motorcycle that are often overlooked that we wanted to talk about tonight, and hopefully you guys got some good information out of it. Got a couple more comments here we'll be going through. So Mr. Jim Montaigne, thank you for tuning in again, Jim. He says that he's talking about the 450 Ibex. The bike's been great. Still getting it outfitted with the goodies, but it's been a smooth ride, and I've been beating on it to see what it'll take. Looking forward to getting out, but I want to get some better tires. Lots of good reviews about the little CF Moto 450. I think it's definitely here to stay in that market. He also says Gear Lube 7590 for the O-ring child chains has been running for a few years. Chain wax and other stuff is super hard to clean. My buddy Larry Frank Orloff says, "What's up, buddy?" Larry, how are you doing, man? Thanks for tuning in tonight. Mr. Rob, one of our number one fans, says they run DID X-ring chains on all their bikes, even the Van 200. They're a little bit narrower also, so there's more clearance for the cases and the chain guides. We only use steel sprockets. I stay away from those fancy two-piece sprockets. I've seen them bend and come apart in rock gardens. Happened to me. That's what I was talking about. Ended my race early. All right, we appreciate everybody tuning in tonight and commenting. I kind of just wanted to switch it up just a touch and do several different had to layer downs tonight to make up for the lack of a show last week. So let's get into a little more of had to layer down.
Did you run into some clippings? Did Barb take the kids? Well, Hoss, maybe you had to layer down.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's had to layer down is a little bit of what I like to call Mike Metzger clippings. Let's see this. Play some sound here. Give me 1 second. This comes from our friends at California Dual Sport Riders. If you guys aren't following them, make sure you follow them. They got some really funny stuff on there. Woo!
Is that Tyler Vincent?
That might be Ty. That's a good Tyler impression.
Dude, I felt so bad when he did that and punched the nav unit on his Beta because I was afraid of breaking the one I found and like the whole time I had it.
That's a very impressive backflip, in my opinion. I mean, he landed that thing. So.
That's
I counted.
What the fuck from Talladega Nights? I'm flying through the air. This is not good. At least he let go of it.
Yeah, he did. All right, I got a couple more to send up here. Let's see. I think there was 2 more or maybe 1 more. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, here you go. Here's a good one. This is some ghost riding the whip clippings.
Oh, yeah.
Whoop, right into the drink.
Dude, everybody's a gangster until the back end starts swapping sides.
Yeah, he wasn't hurting that, so had a pretty nice cushion landing there.
He picked a lot better place to land than I did.
All right. And last and certainly not least, the last had to layer down tonight. I'm calling this one Ghost Possession Clippings. This thing has a mind of its own.
It was trying to make that hill. That's why it's wide open.
Woo! Again, I appreciate everybody from California Dual Sport Riders sharing this on their media pages and letting us have a little hat
Yeah,
load.
that's a good page to follow.
Yeah, they definitely are. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for us this evening. We appreciate you tuning in here for episode 90 of Tall Boys and Trackmasters. Couple show notes coming up here in the next few weeks. Next episode, we have Mr. Jeff Nash from Climb joining us on the show. I'm looking forward to talking to Mr. Jeff. That'll be a good episode. And as I stated to Trevor off camera a little bit earlier today, we got our second set of international guests coming on the show here in a few weeks. And they have one hell of a story that you all are not going to want to miss to talk about. Super excited about that.
I am very excited.
Yep. All right. That's going to do it for us here on Tall Boys and Trackmasters. And thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for your time. Do your maintenance. This is a threat.
We're coming after you. See you guys.
See you guys.